Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week of the teams. A little bit more reserved this week after we all came crashing back down to earth after the weekend's loss against the Giants. Before we do get stuck into the teams, as always, a big shout out to Southside Pizza. If you can't make it to the footy this Saturday night or Sunday night, or over the weekend, make sure you grab your slice of pizza. Down at Moorabbin, always a good way to fill the belly. So do that. And if you are going to the game on Sunday night, make sure that you do head to Friends of Fire because Saints TV do offer their exclusive deal there. I have tried out their Parma through this deal and I can highly recommend it. It is delicious. So make sure you go and fill the belly before we take on the Dogs this Sunday night. Welcome to Evan and Ollie. Before I do bring up the teams, I might just get your thoughts on last week's game and where it all went wrong. How are you feeling after that loss?
Yeah, still pretty positive comparatively. Obviously, would have liked to get a really solid win against one of the top four sides, but it was a really high pressure, difficult ground kind of game. And while it's the kind of one we need to be competing in more if we want to be a finals team, if we want to beat the best of the best regularly, at the same time, it'll be a great lesson for the kids. So, moving forward with confidence still.
Yeah, I think it came down to the Giants just being that good in the end. I don't think, even though we were poor for patches, I reckon that we brought it back all right and we didn't lie down like we might have previously. So, considering that they're the form team of the AFL and they're looking as good as ever, probably closest to a premiership as they've ever been, to only lose by just under 30 points in the end is a pretty good effort.
Yeah, I agree. It was sort of mixed emotions, very up and down, I guess, particularly that third quarter was very disappointing, but I did like how we went about it in the fourth. We could have easily just sat down and succumbed to the heat and said, move on to next week. But I really liked how we sort of fought back and I thought it was going to turn around and be like a 60-plus point loss, if I'm honest. So I'll take a under 5 goal, which I think realistically, if you told me that before the game, I probably would have been okay with it. I think they probably exposed a few of our weaknesses that we'll get further into as we talk about the upcoming game in terms of height and just a little bit of inexperience, but nothing we didn't know already at the same time. So I did also just want to say regarding this deal, do make sure you screenshot it. That's how you'll get your deal. So just screenshot that, have it on your phone and present that to Friends of Fire and you'll get this deal. As always, for a Sunday night game, the teams are the extended bench. So as I bring it up, I'll show the ins and outs first, but yeah, obviously keeping in mind that it is an extended, and then I'll scroll down so we can see a bit of what the lineup might look like. But a little bit disappointing from our end that, of course, the Bont is going to come back, of course. It just always seems to happen to us that big name players seem to make their return against us. So that for me straight away was the first thing I noticed. I was kind of crossing my fingers and hoping that he might have waited another week, but no, of course not. So that's probably my main thing I'm looking at. Obviously, Liam Henry for us, I think that he will play. And I hope that he does. I think we need him, a bit more experience and speed and pressure and all that. Ticks all the boxes. So, fit and healthy Henry, to me, walks straight back into this team. I also would really like to see Ari play, given, we sort of are really lacking in that defensive area down there. He offers a little bit of height. He may be a little bit inexperienced in terms of one-on-one at the contest, but I just think let's just get games into him ASAP. I think he's going to be a long-term player. So that is my opinion. And then we've got Harry Boyd there as well, who, Marshall did look a little bit proppy. So I guess that's a wait and see. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm so on Shoei. I was excited to see him on the mix there, but just far as a 1-to-1 week goes, I felt like our real shutdown roles were the defenders we were missing against GWS sort of thing. So personally, to me, that makes me think of O'Connell more than Shoei. But at the same time, I'm glad we're still giving a young gun a bit of a go, no matter who it is, instead of just sort of continuing with the same list potentially. And still also really keen to see Henry in there. We somehow seemed both too tall and too short and too slow in our forward line. So perhaps a little bit of forward pressure from Henry could go a long way as far as keeping those repeat entries go. So still positive entries there at least.
Yeah, with the forward line, Collard being subbed out kind of baffled me a bit, considering I thought that in a high pressure game, someone of his size and speed would be able to contribute quite well. So maybe there was a couple of things he did that Ross didn't like, and they subbed him out for that. But I would have thought Henry comes in, stuff could get shuffled around because obviously it's Sunday game. In terms of the lockdown that you were speaking about, Evan, I would have thought that maybe it's just my opinion, but I quite liked Angus McLennan in the couple of games we saw last year. So not sure if he's in form. They obviously didn't play VFL last week. There was a break, so I'm sure they played some sort of a scratch match. Maybe Ari performed quite well. If he can hone his defensive craft, then he'll be such a great pickup to have, like sort of back pocket player being able to launch it. He's that one from the kick out. So someone kicks it to him in the pocket, then he gets a few steps and launches it. So hopefully, if he comes in, then he can provide some of that for us. And I agree with Rowan Marshall looking a bit off. He's obviously still not 100%. He had the knock in the Richmond game in the third quarter or the last quarter. So yeah, Harry Boyd would provide a bit extra and a little bit extra up forward as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to worry a little bit about our key position players, and that's really hurting us at the moment. Obviously, we're all well aware of King's situation, or a little unaware with his TBC that keeps coming and going, and 2 weeks TBC. It's a little frustrating, but just wish him all the best and hope that he can get that knee right, because I do think he is really crucial to our team. But yeah, we need Marshall as fit as possible, because he's my most important player to our lineup. In terms of who goes out, what are your thoughts? Obviously, we sort of touched on Collard a little bit. Toby definitely looked very sort of young and fresh, but really happy he got the run. But is he someone that maybe makes way? You've got Hasty as sub. Who do you think comes out if, I guess, Henry comes in? Obviously, Boyd would be if Marshall doesn't come up, but I'm thinking Henry probably does come in. So in your opinion, who makes way?
I think Toby might be a good... I don't know. He was really good against Richmond, but he was a bit off. I don't know. Maybe he just wasn't up to it being very early on for him. He was not as good in the Port game either. He was dropped off a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it might have been worth giving him a run like we did. Like he came in as the sub and then got elevated through Jack Steele not being in the team that week. And I think he's had a good run, and now it's time to head back to VFL level and get your hands on the ball a little bit more, running through the midfield. I think that might be the most obvious option for bringing in Liam Henry. And then as for Ari, well, he's actually listed on field. He's listed at halfback. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But as we know, but maybe Hasty, considering he's been sub quite a few times and he plays a similar role. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Big Man here has raised an interesting point about maybe Ari coming in for Webster, which I don't mind it. Especially, I don't think Webster had one of his best games over the weekend, but in his defence, good luck. Like to see anyone have done okay in that situation. But yeah, having said that, and the other thing that maybe goes against that is that Webster obviously brings a lot of experience, and we are, I guess, lacking experience at the moment. So maybe that's another negative to it. But not a bad option to get some added height down there. So, yeah, don't know if you guys liked that idea of maybe Webster making way for Ari.
Yeah, maybe not just yet until Howard's back, just because leaving Wilkie back there is the only 50-plus gamer roughly. Might be a bit considering our goals for this year, but I think Webster's definitely reached the point where he's playing for his spot just as much as the kids, because he knows that as soon as we're ready to move past him, we need to a certain degree. So hopefully he can recover this time, use that experience to move on. And I think, sort of as we touched on before with Collard, in my head, he's exactly the kind of player we needed last week for that forward pressure, but you didn't feel it. You sort of didn't see those pressure acts. So in best case scenario, he's the one you want there. In actual scenario, perhaps he wasn't living up to that need. So I wouldn't be happy to see him make way for Henry, especially because he's finally getting a good run of it on the field. But I think that might be the most likely alongside Toby, as you sort of mentioned there, because he's had a good couple of games and time to get back into practice. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame to see some of the young players sort of go in and out of the team, which is a good thing, I suppose.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, I think. And then sort of looking at the lineups now, if we focus our attention to the midfield, obviously we welcomed Jack Steele back last week, who to me took a little bit to get into the game, but I think his second half was pretty good. First half, I was like sort of wanting him to get a bit more involved. I didn't really like that he didn't just take that set shot and turned it over with that pass. Little things like that sort of grinded me a little bit, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we go, particularly against the Dogs, whose midfield I rate despite their injuries. I wouldn't be surprised if Bont spends a bit of time down forward, but they also might like to expose us every way possible. But how are you thinking our midfield's looking, and in particular lining up against the Dogs?
Yeah, it's been tough because despite their injuries, their midfield has been doing just fine to a certain degree. Which is pretty unfortunate. I hadn't thought about Bont playing in the forward line. He could be a key position forward in pretty much any other team. So that would really stress our back line with sort of Darcy and Norton back there, which I suppose we'll cover down the track. But at least this time, I imagine it'll be a bit more of a 3v3 midfield battle, not so much the tagging role. And if we look sort of positively at last week at least, and the role Hugo Garcia played at the midfield there, he was one real shining light as far as that goes. And to quickly quote First Crack, Hugo Garcia is number one in the entire competition for turning an effective clearance into a score. So as a 19-year-old, number one in the comp for that. So just don't give him the midfield. But like that, he is now the version of a midfielder that the others need to be following, which is a lot of pressure. But at the same time, it's a lot of upside there.
Yeah, Hugo's going to be a star. I think it's like you don't want to talk negatively about the coaching staff and the selection team, but I think all St Kilda fans could see it last year. In the short amount of time that he played, that's why we were crying out for him to be in the team so often. I think I wouldn't see a tag this week. I feel like Bont is too difficult to tag. There's a comment, I think, from Jack saying that Windy's on the case. I'd love if he could tag him, but I think Bont's just too big. And him going forward as well makes it really difficult to tag because you're not going to send Windy down to full back if he goes to full forward. So I think we've just got to try and you can't just let Bont run amok, but we've got to focus on our own game rather than their game this week. Maybe you could put some time into Libba because he's been quite good to start the year.
Yep.
But in terms of the rest of the midfield, McRae will be back this week. I don't think the Dogs will tag, which is good considering Bedford he didn't get the better of him, but he didn't have much of an impact on the game. So it'll be good to have him hopefully back to full strength against his old side, which will be big. Usually they come out for revenge games in scenarios like this, where he's kind of been left out of the side when he's still got a lot to give. So it'll be good to see him back playing against the Dogs. Hopefully 10+ clearances, I reckon.
Yeah, I'm expecting a big one from McRae, and I hope it falls that way. I do love sort of watching those revenge matches where players seem to like playing against their opposition. And I'm really glad that you did bring up Hugo, because he was definitely a positive for mine. I remember even at halftime last week thinking we're struggling here, but to me, Hugo was a shining light in that. I don't think we cope too well with the pressure and the amount of elite players they have in that team, whereas Hugo just did not look phased at all, and played beyond his years and beyond his games experience for mine. So I'm really impressed with how he went about that game. And if he wasn't sort of on the small side, I almost would have liked to see him line up on Bont, but Bont just probably has him covered for height a bit too well. But I reckon that Garcia will line up really well on someone like Aliba. I'd love to see those two go at it. I'd be really loving to see that matchup. So I hope that does happen, because I reckon that'll be a beauty. And that says a lot about Garcia, who's only played a handful of games, and as we mentioned, a lot of them as sub. So if he can hold his own against Libba like he did on the weekend, I think that's really exciting and potentially goes a long way for us winning this match. I do really rate their midfield. So, yeah, we'll see. But that's probably the matchup that I am really looking forward to, hoping that it plays out. Moving on now to their forward line. Our forward line before I get stuck into theirs. I probably didn't rate our I was expecting a lot more from our forwards in terms of pressure when the ball went down there. We certainly had enough entries, and they might not have been super high quality, but that hasn't really mattered so far for us this season. Like, I feel like our little bull terriers down in the forward line are getting the job done, but they were sort of quiet. The ball just waltzed back out of our forward line with ease. Their backmen transitioned the ball really quickly and put a lot of pressure on our back line. So I really hope that they step up. It was very interesting. We've spoken about Collard, but when he did get subbed, obviously Ross had a few words, and we can make of that what you will, but I was trying to see if it was a bit of he was having a dig, or if it was a bit more of like, it's not always going to fall your way, and you need to just be putting the pressure on and doing the small things when it's not your day. So, I think that's probably along the lines of what he said, but it might have been a bit more harsh than that at the same time. I'm not sure. But Collard's he's had a lot to like, so I'd hate to see him dropped after one bad game. So hopefully he holds his spot. What are you thinking in terms of our forward line and how we can, make the Dogs' defense worry about us down there?
It was quite worrying, I think, seeing that it was six out of half of our goals were kicked by Sharman and Messiah. Sharman, obviously great, performing really well, competed, I thought, all day. Probably the only forward that could hold his head really high. I thought Mason Woods still competed as much as possible, but he always does that. That's a given. And the fact that Naz had two of them, from memory, two of them were outside 50 goals on the run. Yep. The other one, I think he went forward because there was too many in the midfield, so he had to run forward to avoid 666, and he ended up with the ball in his lap. So he was he had leather poisoning on the weekend, but the fact that half of our goals had to come from him and Sharman is a little bit worrying. Mm-hmm. Half back / he ran through the midfield quite a bit towards the end of the game. Shouldn't be kicking three. That's just as great as it is for us to watch, and for his stocks in the future. Like, that's not what you want to see. You want to see your Higgins, your Collards kicking those goals. So that's probably the biggest worry for mine.
Yeah, the Naz goals need to be the icing on the cake, not half your score sort of thing. Before I jump into the forward line, I see Noah's mentioned Stocker on Bont. I know they're not the right size, but I love Stocker so much. That smother, tackle, score involvement. He's my favourite player on the team, so I'll take that any day of the week. But as far as forward line goes, I'll probably mention Mitchie a little bit later as sort of under the microscope there. But I did think we were both somehow too tall and not putting enough forward pressure. But at the same time, as I sort of mentioned before the stream, the Giants were running at sort of 244 pressure rating in that second quarter, which any forward entry when you're competing with that is going to be absurd. But that's the kind of pressure that you see in finals, not just a small ground and gather round. So if we want to be a finals team that can score, compete, contested mark, and get those proper forward entries under pressure, we need to be, learning from a game like this. But yeah, need to see a lot more from Higgins and Owens in a tough game like this in particular.
Just on that, can we not play at Norwood ever again, please? Shocking football to watch. Like
Barossa looks lovely.
Yeah, considering it wasn't as high scoring as the Bulldogs Lions game and wasn't as, I suppose it was quite high intensity, but it wasn't as back and forth. It was just like, I don't know, it just doesn't look good to watch football, if that makes sense. Like it's a football ground, obviously Norwood, great Sandful team, but it's just not right for AFL football.
Yeah, it was so funny. Like every time Ross has had a press conference or whatever, he's managed to mention Norwood, and I just love how he's gone about it because he's not said a bad word about Norwood, but he's pretty much just like said what's on his mind without saying. It's so clever how he speaks sometimes because I just like sit there chuckling at him like, yeah, we all know you're not a fan of playing there. It's not an AFL standard ground. I don't think like they need to come up with something else if you're going to have gather round. Like it's great for the 80% of the teams that don't have to play there, but the ones that do, they suffer. So even trying to get tickets there, it's really tough to even go watch. So let alone have to play there. But yeah, hopefully in the future, I don't know how they can fix it up, but yeah, I'd like to. I mean, that's 2 years now in a row that we've been stuck playing there. So at least give it to someone else next year if you're going to keep the ground, please. Note to AFL. But yeah, now moving on from the forward line, we now will talk about the back line, and probably what I'm most worried about is, again, the Dogs forward line because they're very tall. Sam Darcy for mine, he is really crucial already to that Bulldog side. He's such an imposing, what is he, like nearly 7, he's 7 foot or something. He's so tall. I don't know how. We're going to have to just make sure our pressure's really high and they can't get good delivery to him because I can really see him kicking a bag. And then you've got a player like Norton who hasn't had the best start to his season, but he did have an okay game last week, and he's always someone that you have to respect. So I'm very interested to see what your thoughts are on who goes to Darcy, who goes to Norton. Even that O'Donnell, he's actually looked okay too at times, and he's got quite a good size on him too. So definitely stretch down there once again. So this is making me think more and more as I speak that maybe Ari does come in. But what are you both thinking?
Yeah, that is a tough forward line to face for any team there. They're maybe not the quality of Adelaide's big three sort of thing, particularly with Norton out of form and O'Donnell being a recent addition sort of thing. But there's the big man in Darcy just standing there, such a menacing threat despite the lack of games. So hopefully, I've got to imagine that Caminiti goes to him just because of height. And then my main concern is how we watch him across the ground. I think one of the most dangerous things about Darcy is when he gets it on that wing and whips it around on his left boot there, and then somehow manages to get back in the forward line for the contested mark. So Caminiti just a full week on the track, making sure he's got the legs to keep up with him around the ground, I suppose. And then just, actually working as a unit. We seem to drift off a lot last week, either confusion or just the skill of GWS's forward line. So hopefully get a bit more communication, a bit more height, and don't lose Darcy amongst the midfield.
Yeah, I think Norton's also a threat up the ground. He loves a lead up and run and jump at the ball. So yeah, it's such a tough matchup because either of them, they can both do both things, if that makes sense. Both of them can lead up at the ball and also stay at home and be competitive. So we're going to have to balance that, whether Wilkie's more or Wilkie or Hammer's more of a stay at home and they swap that way rather than sticking with the one player. I'm not sure. But obviously Darcy's a worry, considering not only is he so good, but he's so tall. So even like in the Collingwood game a few weeks ago, you watch Darcy Moore, who's all-Australian defender, caliber player, and he can't even reach Darcy. Like that's such a worry when your good defenders just cannot get near them because they're that tall. Like that's not good. And then like the threat, like we were talking about before, the threat of Bont going forward adds a whole nother layer because we need another big body, whether that's Stocker, like Noah mentioned in the comments, or maybe Ari goes to him, or however it works, whether he goes there when Norton / Darcy are on the bench. I'm not sure. Ari makes so much sense being in the team. Like whether he's a good defender or not, size matters a lot in defense, especially when you're playing against two great tall forwards. Bont, who's the best player not to win a Brownlow, at least in the last 20 years. And O'Donnell's also tall and a tall threat. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about their smalls, considering there's no weightman.
Yep.
So I think your Webster / Burns will be okay, whoever's playing back there. Same as Nasiah. It's just such a tough matchup considering we've got no Dougal Howard. Zane Cordy's injured as well.
Mm-hmm.
O'Connell, I would have thought he'd be back in. Maybe he's not cleared the concussion protocols. So, yeah.
I would have almost thought both Ari and O'Connell with the height they're facing this week. And also, just super quickly looking at that, it's starting to really frustrate me how not wrong, but misplaced our players are on that map week after week. Caminiti hasn't played forward all year. Kilda didn't play down back. Sinclair's not going to be in the midfield. Like, I know it's a small thing, but it makes it really hard to read from our angle, at least.
Yeah, I know it gets very confusing.
Well.
Yeah, it definitely confuses me when I'm trying to discuss like line by line. I'm like, wait, what line? That doesn't make sense. So. Yeah, but I'm thinking maybe when Darcy does push up the ground, I know Wood doesn't have him covered for height, but nobody does. But I'm thinking just his experience, and maybe he can just put a bit of body on him and he can beat him with experience that way. Maybe it could be worth trying. The only bad thing with that is I don't mind Wood just playing forward at the moment, given how we're not super tall down there either. And I really like what he's brought to the team in our forward line. I think he's been really solid and really consistent, but I'm very interested to see how Ross goes about this. I'm sure he has a few things up his sleeve, so I can't wait to see sort of what tactics he brings out. And also keeping in mind that last year the Dogs absolutely thumped us, so this is a revenge game in that sense for mine, because that was just an absolutely putrid game last time we played them. The game was over very early, very frustrating. They just made us look completely slow and out of our depth, and yeah, it was very disappointing. So I really hope that they show the players a replay of that game and get them fired up. Especially McRae can lead the way and Steely can get behind him and we can get this win. But the back line, we're going to have to make sure that ball does hit the deck, because I do think we've got him when it hits the ground, especially like with Naz and Sinks running off. I think if we can get that ball, dirty ball, as Ross likes to call it, I think that will hold us in good stead, but it's just a matter of making sure that happens, and probably does start in the midfield. So not an easy game by any stretch. I think the Doggies are in pretty good form. So, yeah, I really rate their team as a whole, and they do have a lot of injuries. So I think they've done quite well considering, and I don't know what happened to them in the second half, because they were looking $1 million and then they just – I don't know if they succumbed to the pressure of the Lions a little bit, and the Lions were just taking them easy, took their foot off the pedal and come out in the second half and just played their brand a bit more. I don't know. Sometimes the good teams do that. They sort of just take a bit to get in the game and then they just go bang. So I don't know. It was very strange watching that game because the Dogs were absolutely on fire. But yeah, maybe the Lions just took it up a notch, I think. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what we do. And that sort of brings me to looking a little bit more into the opposition now. I think, we've touched on them a fair bit, but Bont coming back is definitely bringing a huge challenge to the team. I think, though, I'm excited by it. Like, I'm excited to see who lines up on him and how they go. The whole midfield, like, I quite rate Richards, even that Davidson's come in and held his own. So, yeah, I don't like to say I like the Dogs because for some reason I'm not normally a fan, but I quite like the brand of footy they've been playing so far this year, but just hope that it's not against us. What are you sort of looking at from an opposition point of view?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of exterior factors last week. Like, it's really hard to tell if it was, they fell away because they're playing the Premiers. They fell away because the weather. Not certain why they went about it the way they did, but that would definitely be my point for us, would be they started really quick last week. And obviously we've had our troubles, not so much this year, but for the last little while with starting games and feeling like we're even there in the first quarter. So matching them in that initial intensity will be important. And then, as you say, that we've already touched on Darcy, but that midfield, their ability to just get a clearance in and out, whether it's Libba, Kennedy, who started over there, that's going to be a tough matchup. So hopefully our guys have got a bit of a kick into them after last week and can make sure that McRae is getting clearances in return.
Yeah, all I wrote in the run sheet was Bont back in, typical. That's just, the team hadn't even come out when I wrote that. I just knew that he would come back in. They said he was likely, he was a test, and I'm just like, yeah, he's in. Like, it's so frustrating. It always seems to happen to us, but maybe that's just our mindset as St Kilda fans. But we've talked a lot about the Bulldogs midfield and forward line. I'm not too worried about their defence. Maybe Dale off half back.
Yep.
But aside from that, I think our tall forwards, or whoever plays tall forward, can beat Liam Jones. Rory Lobb's been doing a bit of intercepting, so whether we can keep him away from the ball like we did with Aaliyah a couple of weeks ago, or engage with him in one-on-ones rather than letting him run and contest that way. Their defense is not too worrying. So I think we can get on top in that part of the ground, which is positive considering it's a very even, if not Bulldogs leaning matchup in the rest of the ground. I don't think English has been back to his sort of best football that we've seen. So if Rowan's fit, maybe regardless of whether he's fit or not, it might be a good idea to bring in Harry Boyd just to run English off his feet, because I don't think he's been that good. So Rowan can get English around the ground, and then he's a good tap ruckman, so Harry Boyd's good for that as well. Number one worry is obviously Bont, because he's such a triple threat. He will get you on clearance. He's good without the ball. He can go forward. He can kick three. Yeah, I don't have much else to say about Bont. He's just the best.
He's Bont.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they shorten his name. He's just Bont. He's not Marcus. He's not Bontempelli. He's just Bont. That's it.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought up Marshall, because I was going to mention the Marshall-Tim English matchup. Because a couple of seasons ago, I was sort of thinking, for me, they were the two upcoming ruckmen in the league. But yeah, you're right. English has had a bit more of a slow start. But if Marshall was fit, yeah, I quite like that matchup, because to me, they're sort of similar players in a way. Tom English sort of gets a few marks around the ground, and Marshall's sort of a bit like that as well. But I think Marshall's maybe more capable of going forward and kicking goals, but we haven't really seen him do that so much this year. And I don't know if it is because he's maybe not 100% fit and we've just had to utilise him in the ruck as much as possible. How have you sort of seen Marshall's start to the season, and how do you think, do you think he can play a big role in getting that midfield going and hopefully winning us the ball and getting us clearances and all that?
Yeah, it's obviously he's had a very interrupted preseason and had a big year last year as well. So he's had plenty of troubles over the last 18 months. I think he's still been more than serviceable. but perhaps just not that extraordinary presence that we've come across the last little while. And barring one or two games, it has been our leaders at times that have been the issue as far as whether we're able to go up a notch, whether it's Steele or Marshall or the like. Sort of they're the ones that seem to drop away or be a bit inefficient. So it's definitely not just him. We're almost been held up by our sort of 10 to 50 gamers. So there's good and bad there. Actually, all right, I'll take a little bit of that back. Obviously, Jack Sinclair and Mason Wood, for the most part, have not been part of that problem. But, your Hill and your Marshall and your Steele have had off games this year. So, it's spread out amongst a lot of our seniors that can pick up a lot from this point on.
Yeah, there's been a lot less of him, taking that big intercept or offensive contested mark on the wing that we get quite a lot, because we like to, if we get stuck, we like to just bomb it on the heads of our tall guys. So there's been a lot less of him, the presence that you mentioned. He just hasn't been in those spots as much. But he's clearly underdone. He was limping against Richmond. He still didn't look right against Port. So he's obviously not great coming off his preseason. So you obviously don't send him to the twos. You might rest him if he's really not great, but Boyd coming in would be such a breath of fresh air. And if we get to it, I won't go into it too much, but it means Machado doesn't have to play second ruck, which we've spoken about to no end over the last year or so. So, yeah, I don't need to go into Machado second ruck anymore, but be nice to see Rowan dominate like we know he can, that sort of top 2-3 ruckman in the comp.
Yeah, and sort of on players sort of needing to step up and maybe our leaders not leading the way at times. We've sort of not done that under the microscope so much the last couple of weeks because we've had our wins, but after a loss, it might be a little bit easier to pinpoint a player that you might want to focus on who can step up and maybe he's not gone missing, but, need a little bit more from to make sure we get the win on Sunday night. So who are you picking as your player who maybe needs to lift a little for us and get us over the line on the weekend?
I'll let you go with Mitch Owens, Evan. So I'll talk about Jack Steele. I know he's been injured the last couple of weeks, but he's sort of, I don't want to say he's fallen off, but he hasn't been able to recapture his form since he's been carrying injuries in the last year or so. I hope it's not the downfall of Jack Steele, considering how good he was between sort of 2019, 2021, 2022. He was in a lot of people's Brownlow predictions across those years. I just want to see a little bit more ball. I want to see the ball in his hands because he makes good decisions with the ball. But in recent years, he's become more of a tackle player, lower disposal, like your 15 to 20 range rather than your 20, 25 plus, like we've seen from him. So a little bit more grunt from him. Whether he needs to get on the outside and deliver that way, maybe that would be good in terms of getting him maybe some more confidence back into the game a little bit, back into his groove. And he's our captain. You need your captain to be firing, and he hasn't really. He obviously leads by example on field. We know that, but it's where it helps having Wilkie as part of the leadership group because he's more vocal. But I still think your captain has to be a vocal player on field, and that's just not what he's been giving. So I think he just needs to get back to basics. What he knows he can do, just work on that so much more in game because he tears it apart when he's playing well.
Yeah, particularly because I was hoping when we picked up McRae, it would be the perfect combination with Steele, that if one of them was off or one of them was being tagged, Steele finally had sort of backup there, had a 2IC. Obviously, we've had Crouch and Ross, but perhaps not performing at the level that McRae has shown already that he can do. So that combination, you're hoping that would give Steele a bit of space. But I'll jump into Mitch Owens. He's a bit of a cult favourite. He's had a couple of really solid games this year, but Not wholly his fault, but statistically, a lot of turnovers, more than half his disposals were turnovers for only one score involvement. So that's not really being the second pillar of your forward line that you need him to be. But also, it was a really important game for him to be up there and to just compete, sort of thing, because they had Buckley, they had Taylor down back, and we needed Sharman to have a clean lead because Mitchie was competing across the pack. So he wasn't quite able to be that competitive force that was either making the ground balls or doing that. I'm not saying he didn't do that at all or give it the effort, but perhaps didn't stand up visibly the way that we needed him while we're still missing those key position players. So hoping that this week, maybe I'd imagine they've got a pretty flexible backline, really, but perhaps if him and Sharman are making sure Lobb and Jones just can't get those intercept marks, force those ground balls and get Higgins into the game, get Hall, get Collard, whoever is up there, actually allow your forward line to function and stop those intercept marks. But yeah, I'm hoping a bit of a recovery game for the whole forward line.
Yeah, it's funny you've picked those two players because Steely was probably first for mine, and it's only because I rate him so highly and I just want to see him back to his best. And he's definitely had a frustrating sort of couple of seasons, really, just in and out through injury. Can't get a flow on of games, or there's always just something I feel impacting him being able to get back to his best. And I'm with you. I just thought McRae coming in would really, those two together would just be real key, and couldn't wait really to see those two, and then Garcia helping them out. And then the same thing with Owens. He was probably the one throughout the game that I was sort of like, come on, Owens, you're a bit MIA. You need to get involved here and crash those packs even at a minimum, because we just weren't seeing it at all. And yeah, it was really like noticeably missing because he's been so good the last couple of weeks in particular. I think you notice, when they're not bringing it, the same sort of thing with Collard. He had two really good games and then a quiet one, and they're not always going to have really impactful great games, but you can still do your 1% of stuff. And I just think that that's been missing a little bit. And as a captain, Steele just needs to be bringing that all the time in one way or the other, whether is just tackling, but I don't know, they just haven't noticed Steele's presence as much as I would like as a captain. So yeah, I'd really like him to step up, but maybe I will go with someone a little bit more fringe. I kind of was tossing up between two with Jones and Burns. Burns, he definitely got a lot of the footy over the weekend, but I almost reckon the Giants wanted him to have the ball, because every time he got it for mine, I was just panic stations, because just not confident with his decision making, number one, and then that puts his teammates under a lot of pressure. And I think the team as a whole has been really good at taking the first option this year and not putting their teammate under the bus, I guess, with those little wayward handballs. Or I just feel like Burns is the main culprit of putting his teammates under pressure or just turning the ball over. So I'd really like to see a better game from him. He's very on the fringe for mine. I don't think he's best 22. I'd love for him to just prove me wrong, come out with a game like he did against Carlton last year. And then same with Jones. I've been quite happy with Jones this year, but quite poor on the weekend. Not enough involvement, very MIA as well. So I'd like him to step it up this weekend. We're going to need as much midfield depth as possible, and I've really liked him at times, what he's brought, being thrown in the thick of it. So hopefully he can get back to that. Obviously it's all 23 need to do their bit, but that's sort of the players there for mine. And on that, I guess we can talk about the key to winning this game. Where do you see this game being won or lost?
Yeah, probably shutting down their half-back a lot better than we did last time. Ash and Whitfield had a lot of free reign. Obviously, Sinclair and Naz had similar on the other side, but in this case, really, it's mainly Bailey Dale that you have to worry about, that rebounding ball. So hopefully we can shut him down and stop a lot of their transition. But probably most importantly, just handling the pressure that they throw at us a lot better than we did last week. Obviously, Giants, as we've mentioned, had extreme pressure but take that as a lesson. And if the Dogs have, 210 on the pressure scale, well, that's nothing compared to last week. Just sort of, I know it's elite, but just run with it, because we've seen worse, and stop messing up those. Stop over handballing, stop trying to get too cute with it, sort of thing, and panicking because of the perceived pressure being so high. So hopefully we can quickly learn from that, and keep moving on.
I think just on your point, Evan, Lockie Ash had 20 disposals at halftime. That tells you all you need to know. A halfback with 20 touches at halftime is ridiculous. Like, most halfbacks don't get, unless you're Lockie Whitfield, Jack Sinclair types, most of them don't get over 25. So the fact that he had 20 at halftime is crazy. I think I'd like to see us get back to the sort of forward entries that we've been seeing in the first few rounds of the season. Short hit up leads, especially when we're undersized. We've got Cooper Sharma and Mitch Owens. We know that Mitch Owens can go missing when the ball's just put on his head all the time, because he'll get the best defender if there's no other forward that we've got. Kilda being dropped makes sense last week, but at the same time, Jack Seal was his replacement, so obviously he's not going to be a key presence in the forward line, which is a bit odd. So if we're going to run out that way with no real presence other than Sharman and Owens, then I'd like to see a bit more hit-up lead type football. I think that's where Cooper Sharman scored a lot of his goals, or he got a lot of shots from those sort of leads. Jack Higgins does that a lot. I reckon he scored less goals in general play compared to set shots this year. It just looks like better football when we're hitting up short leads, and you've got players out the back. We've had Collard out the back a few times this year. It just it flows better as a football. I suppose as football tactics, it flows better to have short leads, hit them up, and then when we do have our key forwards, such as Max King, if he comes back this year, whatever ends up happening with that, whether we bring Keeler back in, then he can be stay at home full forward. As much as I'd like Max King up the ground, if we're playing this style of football and he doesn't have someone to work with him, like a second ruckman who's resting forward, I think the best way to not have a chance at winning, but the best way to make us more competitive and keep us in the game even when we're not playing well is for all the forwards and mids who push forward to be moving around, because then it throws off the defense if they're playing zone, and it creates more options for yourself and for your teammates.
Yeah, you both raised really good points, and I really hope we can get this job done, because for me it's a very, very important game. To me, it's an 8-point game, this one, so I really hope we can win it. And I agree here with a bunch of stuff. It's won or lost in the midfield for mine, because I completely agree. If we don't impact their clean delivery into the forward line, and we don't allow, like, if we can't get them playing dirty ball, we're in big trouble, because Darcy's just going to mark everything, and we're just going to have hope that he has an off game in terms of goal kicking accuracy, I think, and we don't want to be relying on that. So for mine, it's won or lost in the midfield. I also hope that our young kids don't drop their heads after last week, because coming off the high of a three win in a row, you can be buzzing, and then you crash back down to earth with a loss like that. And I just hope that Ross just reiterates how well they bounce back after the Adelaide loss. And just, the Giants are a very, very good team. And for mine, they should be playing in the grand final this year at the minimum. So, lots to like. Ross Lyon did sort of touch on that in his press conference. So I just hope that he can get the boys back up and bouncing back pretty quickly, because anyone going up against that Giants team is up against it at the moment. And we are a very young team. And I think we did hold our own okay. So, but I do think our midfield needs to lead the way. Jan's also pointed out Wilson has turned the ball over a little bit. I actually thought he had a better game on the weekend, though. At least he got his hands on the ball a bit more for mine, or was a little bit more impactful in terms of his run and carry and that kind of thing. So I don't mind if he turns it over, if it means he's getting his hands on it more at this point in time. Obviously, want him to clean up his disposal. But I think winning the ball, you can clean up your disposal, but you've got to win the ball first. So, happy to see Wilson get his hands on it a bit more. I think all goes to plan. We can get this done by 20 points. Boys, before we finish up and let everyone get stuck into the Collingwood-Brisbane game, what is your margin and who's your tip?
Yeah, I know we've mentioned a lot of their sort of key position players. They've got really solid stars on every line, but I still think that our actual ball movement and our transition outpaces theirs. And if we've got our players working our system, if we've got sort of our coaches out strategizing them, I think we have a better lineup in that regards, as shown by sort of like the Geelong game, the Port game, were games where we managed to get our system up and running and could outpace, a lot of really impressive stars. So I'm looking for a repeat of that. I'm going to go Saints by 2 goals.
Both good calls. I reckon just before I mention my margin, I just want to give a shout out to the merch team because they never miss. They dropped the Anzac Guernsey this week.
Yes.
Such a great kit.
Yeah.
I like the inverse hot cross bun, and I've got the Red Rooster jacket on, which they don't miss on the jackets either. So
Yeah.
we're all going to be broke by the end of the year the way they're going. Still haven't dropped the Indigenous around Guernsey too. So I reckon Saints by 8 points. I think it'll be a close game. Obviously, we all pretty much tip St Kilda every week regardless because we're biased, but that's okay because that's what people come here for. Yeah, I think it'll be a close game. I'm hoping for a shootout. I like those sort of games, watching the end-to-end football, Marvel Stadium, both reasonably fast-paced teams as far as I'm aware. Yeah, Saints by 8 for me.
Very nice. Yeah, I like a little bit more of a margin just so that I'm not having a heart attack, but the Saints don't like to do that most weeks, let's be honest. So thank you to everyone for tuning in. Exactly. I do agree, read the merch. I definitely am going to be broke. I've had the items in the cart for a little bit like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. But definitely like everything they bring out, including the jacket you're wearing there. So thank you to everyone for tuning in, all your comments, and for those of you who might be joining a little bit later with the replay. Hopefully we get this done. It's a very big game Sunday night, which is a bit unusual. It's annoying having to wait extra long, but that is what it is. At least it's a nice Easter Sunday with the Monday off. So everybody enjoy. Make sure you get down to Friends of Fire and grab yourself a Palmer. And as always, not a home game, but get yourself down there if you're in Melbourne this weekend and you're not away, and cheer on loud and proud. And as always, go Saints.
Go Saints.
Go Saints.
And thank you, Evan and Ollie.